Hello, Bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 37 of Little Things for Bonsai People, the podcast. And this time I'm joined by my co-host, Carmen Lesko-Biensky. How's it going today?
Good. I am definitely not tired. I totally didn't just wake up like 30 minutes ago from a nap. Very, very wide awake.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Is it still boiling where you're at?
Is what?
It kind of rolled off the tongue weird. Is it still boiling where you're
Boiling.
at? That's
No,
my
it's
southern
actually,
accent.
it's been really nice the last week or so. But it's getting a little bit hot this week, like mid 80s, upper 80s. So
Is it really humid there in Portland right now?
nope, it's pretty dry.
Dry. That's interesting.
Yeah, it was like 75 and kind of cloudy yesterday, and there was even a little mist in the air. It was very strange. It's very not July.
It sounds kind of pleasant.
It was great.
Yeah. For Louisiana, it's been unbelievably humid. Even whenever like the cloud cover comes out and it rains a little bit, there's so much heat radiation coming off of everything and the instant evaporation that like
you're swimming.
Yeah. Well, it's different. And I don't want to put down like, oh, you're in Portland, you'll never know. No, because it's similar.
Michigan gets pretty swampy, you know. There's been days where it's been like 95 and like 80% humidity, and it's just disgusting.
And you wear glasses, and so I'm sure when you walk outside, your glasses fog up instantly on days like that.
Oh yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. It's so annoying.
So you know what? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Because I was thinking about this morning. I was helping Caitlin move a mirror because she sold it on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. And as soon as I brought it outside, the whole thing fogged over. And I'm just like, oh, that's the kind of weather we're having. It felt fine, though. But anyway, we always like to talk about the weather.
Very important for bonsai stuff.
It is. I always keep track of the weather. It's actually been pretty easy on our trees. I mean, I haven't really had to water my personal trees but once a day.
Oh, that's so nice.
I don't know. And also I have good shade where I'm at too. So I guess that has to contribute to it. But yeah, just to get past the banter for a second there. Today we'll be discussing 5 bonsai tips to up your game. So 5 really simple things that I realized a couple of days ago. I was just kind of mulling it over my head. Just things I was thinking about when I started bonsai versus what things that I do now. And little simple things that I felt to be not necessary, or things that were just a little over encumbering to think about when it came to caring for my trees that go a lot further than I could imagine. So I got a little list put together for that. And I just wanted to let you know, Carmen, also for our listeners, we have been running the show. This revamped version of the show has been running for, I think we've been going for about 3 months now, almost.
Is that it? Feels like forever.
This is the revamp of it. So it does feel like forever because we're on a weekly release.
It's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I like it.
Yeah.
This has been eternity.
But our show has been running every week, and we have actually upped our subscribers. I'd like to thank everybody that's been subscribing. We hit our all-time high of over 10,000 downloads.
Oh my gosh.
It's pretty cool. And it's just going to keep going because we're just going to keep making more episodes. But thank you guys for listening. That's awesome that we're getting that far. We have listeners stretching across the world, as far as I could tell on my my analytics. We have everybody from North America, South America, UK, Europe, Asia, even down in Africa, Australia, Philippines. I mean, we're covering all the bases here. I mean, we even got a few listeners in Japan. So
that's wild. I can't believe anybody wants to listen to anything I say. So thank you all very much. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and if you're listening and you're not subscribed on your listening platform to our show, and you listen to our show regularly, just click subscribe. It'll help up the algorithm. It'll get our show out to more people who want to hear me, Carmen, and Mike talk about
the weather.
Yeah. And also really, really good things to just kind of, start from. We always want to start from the ground up. And the reason why I wanted to do, well, literally from the ground up, The other reason why I went to do this five of is because our most listened to episode was of recent time was me and Mike talking about 5 things we wish we knew before we got into bonsai. So this is reminiscent of that episode. It was a very popular episode. So I figured we bring back this formula of back to the basics, 5 things that, that are good, good to know, good to think about. Before we
five little things for bonsai people, you might say.
Five little
things.
There you go. I think I had a couple of little things like quotes and references to make, but you just jumped right on it. You beat me right to the chase on that one.
You're welcome.
So, okay, before we get started, though, getting too far into this, I do need to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons over on patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. And with our Patreon list, we have our patrons called our Bonsai Best Buds. We have a Discord chat where these best buds hang out. We talk bonsai. We're currently undergoing the cutting challenge, and we're having a good time. We're sharing info, sharing pictures, talking about location and stuff and climates and stuff that affect all the trees that we're working with. That list of amazing Patreons starts with Taurus Elise, Warehouse Rat, Boy Snail Grove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Giordano, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia. I always stumble on that one. The Ladies at the Flower Market, Taylor Peacock, Chase Pertweet, Vicky Auth, Austin Atkins, Karen Codswell. Our list is getting a little longer. It's taking me a little longer to get through that each time, but I'm getting a little bit faster every time too. I'm really happy to have all these people and have this little community that we're growing here with the podcast. It's like its own little bonsai club, and you can join it. You go over to patreon.com and become a $5 patron, have your name shouted out every episode. And we'll even we haven't had any tree critiques in a little while, but we'll critique trees, we'll look at progress photos with you guys, talk to you guys in real time, and also answer your questions. Speaking of which, we do have a listener question from my Bonsai Best Bud to go ahead and answer really quick.
Ooh, okay.
Yep. It is from Taylor Peacock. He's submitting another question. He says, howdy, another listener question for y'all. I see y'all in there, so that means that he speaks my language. Have any of you ever braided seedlings / whips together and hope that they will fuse to create a thicker and more interesting trunk? I've seen a video of this quote unquote technique, and I'm testing it out on some young tridents, and I was unsure of its legitimacy. So what do you think, Carmen?
I have not done it. I know I've seen folks like kind of clump a handful of trident seedlings together and tape them together and then let them fuse that way. So in theory, it would work. I don't know that you're going to get, I imagine it might be a little bit flat depending on how, tight or loose the braid is, but in theory it would work. But I don't know that it's a actual method that's used frequently in bonsai. Usually I just see kind of clumping and taping together.
I actually have experience with this.
Ooh.
Yeah. And I use trident maples, kumquats. You can use Chinese elms, ficus, sea hibiscus is a good one too. I mean, that species is kind of just does everything. Some species you have to score them in order to get them to fuse faster or more seamlessly. The only issue you can run into with this braiding process, I wouldn't braid it. That's kind of my first observation or take on the way the question's formatted. And for listeners out there, braiding, when I think of that word, I think of those ficuses that you buy from like Lowe's or Home Depot, and they're literally like you would braid your hair.
Yeah.
That is something I would not do. But if you wanted to do like braiding that made the trunk interesting, it had this like a lumpy grotesqueness to it, I think that would be kind of interesting. I personally think what you were saying just a second ago, Carmen, like the taping them together, but instead of just doing that, take your lump of cuttings and twist them and put wire around them.
Yeah.
And so the wire will also twist them. So you'll get this twisted, contorted trunk line. The thicker trunk thing, I do know what that is. I've also seen that. I forgot what technique that is. There's a name for it. But there's this other technique where you take like a wire, no, like a mesh screen of some kind, and you take your cuttings, and then you literally build the frame of a tree onto it. You get what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So you take like a mesh screen, and then you take all your cuttings or your saplings or seedlings, whatever you want to say they are, and put them all together on there. And trident maples are good for this because they grow so fast.
Right.
The only issue is that you're going to have a completely hollow tree if you do like a frame.
Super weird.
I've seen it though. And I heard that you can, in some cases, if it doesn't heal or fuse correctly, you can put your hand all the way inside of a larger one of these trees. And I don't think it's necessary, but
yeah.
I think it's in the hopes to create like a quicker taper, because you can do like a ring of saplings, and then imagine like for like, let's say you have long hair, Carmen, and some other people who have longer hair, like imagine like pulling your hair together into a ponytail, and it has that quick taper up. That's kind of what, imagine your head is the is the ring of saplings. It's a weird thought, but that's kind of how you have to imagine it.
Right. Yeah.
I prefer the method where you just strap the cuttings straight to each other,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not going to get a giant tree out of it. And I mean, I don't think that's always the goal, but I've seen some really awesome stuff done. Like if you like with the kumquats, I take like a bunch of seedlings and I grow them out to a certain caliber. I'll get them about pinky size, right under pinky size, where they're still pretty flexible. And I'll strap them together and I'll just contort them and twist them. I'll twist them back in on each other. And you can get a lot of, is it takagari, the exposed root?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Is that what it's called?
There's the takagari. No, that's the root to the first branch.
Right.
It's Niyagari.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the one over here trying to teach everybody the Japanese terminologies. But yeah, so you can do some twisted, exposed root looking kind of plants like that. I've seen Mike make beautiful Primna mycophilias like that. And also just exposed root styles with like a plastic bottle also helps, like also does stuff. But to thicken the trunk, I don't think it's gonna thicken the trunk necessarily. It'll make the cutting feel bigger. You can put a bunch of them together, but then one of the things you run into is that if you put too many of them, you have to think about the ones that are inside, and they don't have access to light. They probably won't even bud out, and then you'll have a dead handful of them in the middle. So make sure you twist them, get as many of them rung around this twisted lump of seedlings, and just bend the crap out of them, because if you bind them strong enough, you can bend them without breaking most of them, depending on the species. Tridents are pretty flexible. So, but yeah, it's a good question though. I think it's a really cool way to make really gnarly shohin, and then also grow out, like if you're willing to stick it in the ground, you can grow out a really weird tree, but a really awesome, grotesque looking tree like that. So, any other thoughts on that?
No, well, I guess I have one thought in that, like, I think it's a really cool way to make an interesting tree, but I always feel like as long as we're not using it as a way to cut corners or get something bigger faster, because it might not necessarily be bigger faster, and bigger faster isn't always better, like you have to put in the time to have a good tree, to have an old tree. So you can make something really cool, but it's not necessarily going to get you to your end point faster.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's kind of like the whole thing. It's like, I want a big tree, and like somebody goes out and they dig up like a trident maple or a Chinese elm out of like the landscape here. And then the first thing to do is chop it down to like this big giant stump, and then they just grow branches out on it.
Yeah.
And the branches might not be like the highest quality, because they weren't allowed to, they didn't carve the top out and heal the top out, or build believable branch structure that doesn't feel small and twiggy. It needs to be some, like you said, it takes time. Like if you're going to cut corners, you can't cut corners without somebody with a good eye and bonsai seeing, oh, that tree's been on the ground for like 2 years and the branches are spindly.
Yeah. If you really want a big tree with old branches, buy a big tree with old branches.
Yeah. And it's not, I mean, a lot of people don't have the budget for that. So I can
no, that's true. I'm just saying, like, as far as instant gratification goes,
you got to find old bonsai.
It's not really that kind of hobby.
Yeah. But in the thought, you're in the right vein of thinking, Taylor, that submitted this question. You're in the right vein of thinking, yes, you can create interesting trees by doing this method, but bigger, faster that's not usually how it goes. Like Carmen's saying, either go out and buy one, and then, like I'm saying, put it in the ground and let it rip and develop the right way. It'll take you years to do it.
It'll still be a cool tree.
It'll be nice. Yeah, it'll be very nice. So, but yeah, good question. So let's move on to the 5 things. I kind of made this list of things that I was thinking about over the past couple of days. And just like, I'm going through my own trees in my yard, and I'm thinking about back when I first started. I'm like, okay, these trees obviously have progressed, but I may not be doing I'm doing things purposely. Like, I'm not doing the most technical things with some of the trees that I have, just because I don't want to be that labor intensive with a particular tree. I want it to be a little bit more, free formed with it. I want it to feel like I'm enjoying this tree, and I can do technical things when I feel like it, but I'm not trying to really lay into this tree and be like, I'm going to wire every branch, get every pad right, and get every, bit of taper in this branch correct. It's just like, I'm developing it, but I'm taking my time. So there was like a handful of things I noticed. I was like, oh, but I've been doing these certain things to really keep up and really give me an edge. So I guess this is a good time to take out like a piece of paper, or like a little, or take out your phone for your notes and jot things that I don't know. Some of y'all might just be listening to this like on the way to work, or just kind of chilling somewhere. You're just kind of spacing out. So
write it down, never forget it, get it tattooed on your forearm so you can always reference it.
Oh yeah, tattoo on your forearm is the best way to remember things.
Oh wait, when are you getting your new tattoo? Sorry.
Oh, I got it yesterday.
Is it cool? What is it?
It's pretty cool.
Can I see it?
I mean,
sorry.
it's on my leg, so I'd have to like put my leg into frame. For the listeners out there, it's me and Carmen can see each other on a Zoom call. So,
just send me a picture later. Sorry.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture. But I did end up getting a new tattoo on my leg. It's a character from the Legend of Drizzt series. It's a fantasy series written by R.A. Salvatore about the dark elf Drizzt or Driss. Some people say it different, depends on how you read it. But I got Lolth the Spider Queen, and she's like the big baddie villain in the first story arc. But it's a dope tattoo. But yeah, once I get it finished and stuff, I'll probably post pictures or whatever. But yeah, it's really cool. It was a lot of work really fast. It's like 2.5 hours of just straight line work, and he didn't stop. He didn't give me any breaks. And it's from it's like right below my knee all the way down. It actually goes down my foot a little bit.
Oh, wow. That's big.
And around the backside of my leg, even. It's like the whole front of my shin. So it's fun though. And it's going to take a lot of sessions to get it right. Anyway, this is not a tattoo podcast.
Sorry.
Although that would be interesting. But yeah, so tip 1, this is something that I feel like back when I was thinking about it, I was like, that's so tedious. But this goes a long way. Try to make some kind of journal or check log or something about what you've done with your trees. I know a lot of people, like I know up there at the garden, when you're working with Michael and stuff, you guys periodically check it because y'all are always on those trees. And so it's easier for y'all to conceptualize what needs to be done. Yeah. Whereas people who don't spend that much time with their trees and other things get in the, another, like a job that's not bonsai, you have to make those considerations, So how do you kind of so being in your professional garden setting, Carmen, I mean, kind of describe to me how y'all keep up with that maintenance. Do y'all take any kind of logs or any kind of thing about that?
It's all up here.
It's all in the mind.
No, well, I mean, Michael takes a lot of photos of the trees for the blog, and so that kind of becomes a photo record, talking through major work or revisiting certain trees. So that's really how he does it here. Back at the university, um, I worked with a lot of volunteers, so there were a number of different people handling the trees all the time, and so we did create a log, um, so that we could record what we did. Towards the end of my time there, we did that less and less, just because, a lot of the routine stuff we didn't really feel the need to continue to record. But I remember when I visited the National Arboretum, their collection, back when Jack Sustick was in charge of it, there was a log, especially for volunteers, what they did each day. So I think it is important, at least, even if you're not recording every single thing you do, at least making a note of the big work. Photos are great if you don't want to take the time to write it down. At least then you can reference that. Or if there's something wrong and you have a question about it, or something different happened with a tree one year, making a note of it or taking a photo is a really good way to just remind yourself so that you don't forget.
Yeah. I mean, these things go a really long way. Like you were just saying, it's like, oh, this tree is growing like crap. And then if you took a picture from like the previous year and you're like, oh, it was growing like crap like a year ago too.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of backlog that, like, have I repotted this tree? Was I fertilizing it differently? Was there a hot spell? Like, even recording stuff like we missed a watering, and you can put that date in there and be like, something stupid happened, and you as a bonsai practitioner, something happened and this tree got missed, and we had to put it into a emergency, and either saturate the root ball or do some recovery to kind of maintenance on it, whether it be some deciduous trees, you can like prune them back real quick and hydrate the root ball and put them in the shade and hope that they'll bud back really nice and strong. Junipers and pines, I mean, they'll have obvious languish once they get dehydrated. So those moments are important, and because those things that happened to your tree previously will echo the tree's health. Because every time that there's something that happens throughout the year, like one underwatering will affect your tree more than you realize it. Like, if you go out there and I don't know if you should know this word. You're way more educated than I am in horticulture. Tuger in branches.
Turger. Mm-hmm.
Turger. Tuger's a last name of somebody I know. I always confuse it. Turger is like the amount of moisture in a shoot that's extending. Am I right on that one?
Yeah, it's like the pressure created by the water within the plant cell against the cell wall that keeps the cell like rigid. So if your plant's well hydrated, it'll be stiff essentially. And then if it's not, that's when you get a wilt.
Yeah. So any kind of wilting is a lack in turgor. And that could be, and I know a lot of people get home and be like, oh, that's my tell. My tree's droopy. I need to go water it. It should never get like that. I'm gonna go ahead and slay a couple of hearts here in bonsai and just say, sorry, you can't let your trees get wilty, and that's your tell sign to go water your trees. That's doing way more damage than you can imagine. Like you said, it's Carmen's saying the cell wall can't hold itself up with pressure from moisture and nutrients transfer and all other stuff that needs to happen in that shoot. It's shut down. And so that could result in dieback of root system as well. So it's bad news all around. Like, that shoot could be on the way to extending out and giving you a really nice root tip connected to that shoot. And if it wilts, it'll stunt the growth on that root tip. And that could, in the future, if you do that too many times in a row, you'll weaken the plant to some amount of dieback. And then if you don't record these things, or just be more aware of them in a certain way, it'll help you solve the mystery of like, oh, why is this plant growing so bad this year? That could lead up to it. Or maybe you did a questionable repot job on a tree and you're like, ooh, I don't know if I feel good about this. And you have to make sure you kind of TLC that tree a little bit more in the springtime. And then keep in mind for the rest of the year that tree went through a rough repot. You can't just be like, oh, it rebounded nicely. That might just be the response from it getting cut back too hard or cut the wrong way. And it's just trying to catch up. So what are your
Yeah, I would definitely record your repottings, which is something, you know, we don't always do here, and that's, you know, generally not a problem because we don't keep things on a schedule. So you don't always think, okay, well, I should record when I repot. But when you run into a problem and you try to remember, when did I last repot this? Was it last year or was it 2 years ago? You know, eventually time just kind of all blends together. So if you can't remember if it was, you know, a year or 2 years or 3 years ago, it's nice to be able to fall back on that record and say, okay, no, it was last year we repotted it and it's still, you know, and it's doing poorly this year. So, or, oh God, it hasn't been repotted in 10 years. Maybe, you know, we have to do an emergency repot on it. And, you know, so just being able to quick reference that can be super helpful.
Oh yeah. And like you were saying a second ago, like with Michael's way that he just takes photos. I know nowadays with smartphones, like I take a lot of pictures of my trees and I send them to like, you get photos of like my little Shohin pines all the time. And you're like, oh, look at that.
So
and
cute.
And then I'm like, that every one of those photos has a timestamp. So even if you're just sending photos to your other bonsai friends and you're like, check this out, you can put that into like a catalog in your phone, make a folder and start taking all those, because even though it's not really like the best way to record what's happening, it does tell you what the general health of that tree was and the time of year, the time of day. And you could probably even reference to like what the weather was feeling like. I mean, because the weather means everything to us on the Little Things for Bonsai podcast. Little Things for Bonsai people.
Yeah, for sure. I take
channel.
photos like before I do work and after I do work, mostly for my own purposes of seeing how my work has progressed over my time as an apprentice. But being able to also go back 2 years and be like, oh yeah, I worked on this tree and did this, you know, just being able to search through my phone based on year and month. Again, super helpful to be able to look back at what exactly you did and what a tree looked like after you massacred it, or, you know, didn't.
Or maybe you feel like you feel like you fumbled. It's a better way to say it. Not massacred.
Never massacred a tree.
Man, I really botched that one. No. But yeah. Brings me to my next one. So let's say you do have a tree that's not doing great, or maybe the tree's doing really great and you're recording what's going on. I know one thing, this is one of the things. So this is tip number 2. One of the things that I notice a lot of beginners don't do is they don't fertilize their trees. Now, don't make Mr. Evan go over here and sit you down and tell you why it's important to fertilize your bonsai trees. Like this is Bonsai 101, right? And this whole thing is Bonsai 101. This whole podcast, or our conversation here. But I've seen a lot of people starting out bonsai neglect to fertilize. So tip number 2, get on a fertilizer schedule and have an understanding of species to species, what they need. And then you need to track your dry down process on your trees if possible. What I mean by that is, if you're fertilizing, if your trees are not absorbing the water and there's no nutrient uptake, if you're not seeing that water in that pot, and it's not evaporation. Like, yeah, you can imagine, oh, I watered my tree today and it's just the sun. It's really hot outside today. That's not really what's happening. Trees are drinking water. Trust me. Like if they're healthy and they're looking for nutrients and they're looking for the fertilizer, that water is going to get absorbed and your pot's going to dry down. Something that Mike says a lot, dry down method. I like that terminology. It helps me think about it. It dries from the top to the bottom because all the moisture accumulates at the bottom at the root mass. If there's no, let's just put it this way. Like I've got 2 bald cypresses and I'm tracking the health of both of them and the I'm not fertilizing the crap out of them. I'm giving them a pretty moderate to high amount of fertilizer going into summer because cypress trees take up a lot of fertilizer. They are very hungry, very thirsty trees. In fact, if you put them in a like standing water situation, like in a tub, they will drink gallons of water depending on their vigor. So I heard that one of the club president of New Orleans Bonsai Society, Randy Bennett, he told me that he sees anywhere from 3 to 5 gallons a day, depending on the vigor of the bald cypress.
Whoa.
So like lots of volume of water. But if you're looking at these trees and you got one bald cypress and you watered it in the morning, you're like, man, I know I watered this thing. It must have been so hot today, it dried out. If it's midday and that tree's dry, that tree sucked that water up. And you need to go out there and get it some more water and give it a little bit of like nutrients of some kind, microlife, bio microbes, or some light fertilizer or something, depending on what type of push you're trying to get out of the tree. But then I have this other cypress that is still wet from the morning, and it hasn't really done anything. And it's a little on the pale side. And you're like, maybe this one's it's like it's in the same location, but it's still wet though. And it's just really weird. You're like, well, maybe the soil's just crap and it's just like super organic or something. That tree could have a fertilizer issue. There might be a pH balance that's off in that tree where it can't access the nutrients, and then therefore it's not sucking up the moisture like it needs to, and it's not developing the root system to support that moisture uptake. So this is something that I feel like a lot of people run into, and they water their trees and then out of anxiety they water them again and not actually monitor the dry down process. Does that make sense to you, Carmen?
I don't know that they don't dry down because they're not taking up fertilizer. I mean, they aren't taking up water, and that could be for any number of reasons.
Okay.
But yeah, definitely don't water it if it's wet. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, and that's my concept on the whole thing. I mean, like I said, I'm not studied, but and like the heavy horticultural side, but when I've seen lack in vigor and color in a tree and it's not absorbing, there's more than just fertilizer and more than just water. But
yeah, but usually a root problem.
And it could be a root problem, yeah. Drainage issue. I mean, something could be clogged up and it's not getting aeration. And I use the bald cypresses as a comparison because they don't normally care if they're root bound and you water them and then there's actually no way for the water to get out. It's just trapped and it's in a puddle basically. That cypress should still be doing something. I guess I'm pulling it back around to the fertilizer thing, is that making sure that you just don't forget to fertilize. And fertilizer can be applied all year round if you're using organics, and then fertilizer can be tapered off, or I mean, you have a little bit more in this when it comes to soil components and stuff. When does fertilizer actually completely dissipate?
It depends on what your soil you're using and how much you're watering. So, I mean, bonsai soil doesn't hold a ton of, it's not like a pure organic substrate that'll just hold on to a lot of the nutrient you put in there. We water a lot, so we flush a lot of nutrients out of that soil pretty regularly. So, depending on the time of year and what you're trying to do with your tree, how much you fertilize and what you use can really vary. We usually hold off on a lot of fertilizer until things have hardened off. But again, black pines are different, because we're trying to push candles and really strengthen the tree for the decandling process. And so it really, really kind of depends on the tree. But frequent fertilization is definitely necessary, and using something that's a slow release in addition to liquid fertilizers can be really beneficial, especially because your liquid fertilizer kind of goes through the pot and can wash out pretty quickly, but that slow release makes sure that you're getting something every time that you do water.
Yeah. And you don't want to be explosively fertilizing your trees all year round.
No.
That's why I was saying more species specific.
Yeah.
Some species can take it, like some tropicals that I have experiences with here. I mean, there could be fertilizer ever present in those pots.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But
I know somebody who used to just water with fertilizer water every time.
Yeah.
All tropicals.
If you don't have the schedule and you kind of forget, the worst thing you can do is forget to fertilize your trees completely. So that's why I always recommend to people who are starting to accumulate a collection of trees and they're like scared that they're not going to be able to apply the appropriate amount of fertilizer. I just tell them one thing you can invest in is the organic fertilizer bags or pellets or whatever is super slow and gentle release, and you can apply that all year round, even during dormancy. Even after repotting, even at the harshest repot, you can put those fertilizer bags back on because of how gentle the fertilizer is. So, but don't use synthetic to that same extent. Don't go synthetic when I'm saying that. If you guys want to hear like just a regular run-of-the-mill fertilizer that most people assume that they're going to use for their trees is Osmocote. Osmocote's great, but it has an outer coat that when the temperatures are really high, especially here in Louisiana, I'm sure it's the same in Portland as well, that if it gets too hot, then the coating of the fertilizer just dumps really fast. And it basically is useless above like a certain temperature. I think it's like 90 degrees here. It's just when it's just useless at that point.
I know it's gotten better over time. I know people in the past have burned trees with it. It seems like the coat has gotten a little bit better, but yeah, some of those slow releases can definitely be problematic as far as you never know really how much is going into your tree, especially if they are kind of temperature dependent like that. Yeah, that can be an issue.
Yeah, I've had a ficus Benjamina, I think it was, brought to the shop one time, and someone asked me to repot it for them. And the tree had never been repotted. It was like bought from Walmart or something, and then put into like a bonsai container, so that they had like the concept down, but the tree was like grown so tall and big that it completely just like its root system was the shape of the pot that it was in. It was like a rectangle. And I was like, holy crap. Like it was interesting because this tree was like kept in a sunroom, and they loved this tree. They watered it and they fertilized it. And then it just took on the form of the pot because of how fast and how dense the root system got. And I just remember they were like, we're trying to water it, and the water just sits on the surface. And I'm like, there's no soil surface. That's the tree. Like,
yeah. There's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah, it's just sitting on top of what's essentially the trunk. And like I went to touch where there was fertilizer, and I had cut my finger like previously, and the fertilizer in the water was so intense it actually stung my finger. It made me wince. That's how strong it can be. It's like almost like caustic in a way, you know, like, so kind of imagine that. Imagine if you cut the roots on your tree recently, you got all these like these open wounds, like these little micro wounds all over the root system, and then you pour synthetic straight into it. It's like salt in a wound. So just be careful with that, but lean into slow release. That's a really good recommendation. I know there's a lot of name brand stuff out there. Some of it can get kind of pricey with the micro nutrient brands and stuff. Like I know one is literally called Microlife. That's a good one, but just be careful because in concentration, it can be really strong.
Yeah.
So any more comments on fertilizing your trees and letting them dry down?
No, I don't believe so.
Good. I talked that one in circles so much that it got all the wind sucked out of it, basically. Okay, so tip number 3 is something else that I realized. This is going to be kind of a deciduous thing. I think it could. Oh well, needle plucking is the thing that you do with conifers, with junipers and stuff. Remember to thin out needles and leaves on dense trees to save interior branches on the majority of species. Remove flower hips and seed pods and like anything that's like a feature on the tree that that is showy, and then once it's exhausted, that needs to be removed. So thinning and then maintaining flowers and seeds.
Mm-hmm.
These are things that imbalance the tree and also suck energy out of the tree. So let's talk about thinning really quick. And thinning is different. So tell us about pine thinning, because you do a lot more of that than I do.
Yeah, so we do pine thinning a lot of times. So black pine's different. That's something, you do, and you do decandling in the springtime, and then in the fall is when you will do, some shoot selection and but
One
both.
second.
Okay.
You decandle in the spring?
Yes.
What time of year is that technically for you?
June.
That's spring for you?
Well, summer starts June 21st.
But you just said spring.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And we do it like last week of May, first week of June.
Okay. I just wanted the listeners to catch that really quick, considering
Yes.
that we're decandling right now.
Yeah. Well, you're in a hot,
Oh, hot, much
you're in
hotter.
a hot,
Yeah.
long growing season. So we are not. We need to get, our growing season essentially stops in September.
Yep.
Or, well, I guess October. So, yeah. So we do decandling in the spring and shoot selection in the fall. And that's usually with black pine, we'll do some needle removal then. And then single flush pines, we do needle plucking in the fall, usually to balance out the tree for the next season's growth. And so that's for, well, like I just said, balancing out the energy of the tree. And it also allows for better airflow, allows for light to get in onto those branches and create some back budding. And yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, it sounds simple. It's kind of like just kind of backlogging the list so far that I've put together. It's like make a journal. Oh, obviously. It's like these things you're like, oh, well, yeah, well, no, duh. Like I can sit there and remember. And it's like fertilize your trees. And it's like, wow, this guy really thinks we're dumb. But no, it's like these things do go along. These are things that I realized when I started out that just now I do it so much more consistently with so much more thought. And my trees have really made a turnaround. And so, yeah, thinning, like balancing the tree with the needle thinning process that Carmen's talking about. And then the partial defoliation process. So thinning out the tree and making the bottom and the top match in vigor. This goes a long ways. Removing oversized leaves to let in more sunlight. You won't believe how much back budding you'll get if you get sunlight inside of the interior of the tree. It's unbelievable. That's it. It's like you just like hell. That's how it works. But you have to do it. And that's one of the things that I lacked early on was I wasn't doing those things. I was not sitting there thinking about, oh, I need the back end of this branch that's tucked deep in the tree. I wish there was a branch back there to make this tree have more weight on this first branch. It's just it feels weird. But I never thinned it out when I was starting out. I was never thinking about that. I was always worried about keeping the tree alive and oh crap, I forgot to trim this one. Now the top has grown out so much that now we got a big top swell and now we have coarse stuff, all coarse branches growing on the top of this tree. And now we don't actually have like what you could probably say is bonsai anymore. It's just kind of grown out too fast. So keeping on top of those things, but the thinning and the balancing, especially on more developed trees, that even if you feel like this tree is mediocre, and me and Carmen have kind of gone back and forth on critiquing, and we have had some rough critiques. Just sit there and laugh about how mean girls we are about it sometimes. But it's because our expectations are so much higher, and even with really mundane material, you could still build a good body of the tree on top of the foundation of the stock by doing those things.
A lot of times it's better. This is something that, Michael says to me and that we've talked about numerous times with some students is that, it's better to do something than to do nothing. And so you don't have to necessarily go through and, style your whole juniper, but go through and pull off the berries and thin it out a little bit and, just do something, because otherwise it's going to outgrow its potential really. And you're going to lose your bonsai. So yeah, this routine thinning, pruning, defoliation is really, really important.
Yeah. And it's I love that simple quote. It's just like, don't do, just not do anything to it. Just do something to it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like with crepe myrtles, I know if I don't cut the flower shoots off, or if I let them shoot out and then they turn into the seed pods, that's gonna be very detrimental to the plant because it's
Mm-hmm.
gonna suck all the vigor out of it. With your azalea pinching video that you did on Instagram, go over to
Mm-hmm.
Becoming Bonsai and go look at Carmen's her reel about doing pinching out flowers. That stuff's really important because if you don't catch it, you have a lot of missed opportunity for vigor and health.
Yeah.
And those things are routine, and there's something that, like, let's say you got off work and you go home to you go to your little bonsai garden and you're like, I just need to keep my hands busy. Put your hands to work on picking buds out of your azalea. Get all those flower hips out of there. Get the
Yep.
seed pods out of your wisteria. Grow big old giant seed pods. Take the seed
Mm-hmm.
pods out. If it's done flowering, go and get your chochabai and take out all the wilted old flowers. Kind of like, it's kind of like, what was that?
Pull the weeds.
Pull weeds. Oh my
Pull
God.
your
I should have put that on the list. That's actually not on the list, but yes, put that on this part.
Number
Regular
6, pull the
yeah,
weeds.
extension of this one. Thin out trees and look for little maintenance things like pulling off flower hips, seed pods, and if you're getting weedy, this is something that a good old Guy Guidry actually told me one time when I was first talking to him about taking care of bonsai. I was like, how hard can it be? And he's like, well, as long as your weeds don't grow taller than your bonsai, you're doing fine. And so that was always his perspective on it.
Yeah.
But it's true.
They will hog water, they will hog fertilizer, and they do make people crazy when they're in a show.
Yeah, we've talked about displaying bonsai and stuff. Don't leave weeds in your pot and say that it looks natural. Pull the weeds out and moss your tree properly. But in your garden, practice cleanliness with your soil surfaces. Clean it up.
It's a lot easier to go through and pick a couple weeds every day than to wait until you're overrun and you have to do all of it at once.
Yeah, and then you literally spend like almost 2 full days. I've done that before. Like, I'm like, I was just out here weeding this yesterday. How am I not done?
Mm-hmm.
So tip number 4, we're going to progress this list a little bit faster. Eating up a lot of time with some of these. Check your wire weekly, especially at the shoulders and the crotches of branches. And then the second part of that is when you unwire, always look for the opportunity to rewire if you need to. Don't sit there and be like, I'll go wire that later. Take the wire off if need be. And if something changes that you don't want to change, if your angle changes, wire again. Rewire it. Don't goof around and let the shape of your tree get away from you, because then you might forget what you were doing.
That's
So
good. I sometimes do that. I take a wire off and a branch bounces and I'm like, I'll get it later. I don't.
yeah, exactly. Like, things happen. People have lives outside of their bonsai trees, believe it or not.
What do you mean?
like me. Everyone out there. Like, if you go through all this trouble of wiring your tree up and you got a good wire practice and you shaped your tree, you styled it, or you're doing like a maintenance styling just to maintain form, check at the base where the branches emerge from the trunk and look for wire cut in. And the first parts that I would take off is like right at the crotches or right at the shoulders of branches. That's where it can cut in the fastest, especially if you're growing out a new shoot or developing a branch for girth. Mm-hmm. Once you remove that, because that's where it's going to swell the fastest, is against the trunk. Once you remove that, you can leave the majority of the wire on that branch as long as you're checking it at least every week. You don't have to be every day, because that feels a little weird because when you're literally watching grass grow. But yes, dewire your tree, rewire if necessary. And if you don't rewire it, then I'm going to know. And then I'm going to make fun of you for it.
Critique it.
Yeah, we're going to critique the fact that you didn't lay your pads out back out again after you worked so hard to wire it the first time.
Yeah, seriously. Jeez.
Yeah. So, but I mean, some of
That's
y'all.
especially true with
Oh, go ahead.
deciduous. Sorry, I was just going to say that's especially true with deciduous because with conifers, you can get a little bit of biting and it doesn't, affect your overall, the overall aesthetic of the tree. But with a deciduous tree, you don't want wire scars visible. So
No.
that's especially this time of year when the trees are actively growing and swelling. Definitely, definitely, definitely check your wire frequently.
Yeah. One of the things that I deal with a lot here is deciduous. And so I'm a lot more sparing when it comes to full wire jobs because I know when I wire that tree out, I'm going to have to go back and spend almost as much time like going through and checking and removing wire and rewiring. So I make sure to do all the wire I need to, like in the like late fall, right before spring. I might even do some wiring then, right before vigor really starts to kick in. And once it kicks off, I've had a lot of people ask me, even on cypresses and elms and maples here for me, I'll leave my wire on longer because some people's like, as soon as it cuts in, I take it off. I'm like, you take it off a little too early because it's gonna have to cut into a very minute extent because it's gonna spring back. I mean, they're very flexible plants normally, especially like a juniper and pine tree situation where you leave the wire on there for a very long time. I mean,
yeah, we let that stuff cut in a little bit for sure.
Yeah. And you see it on there. And I've even been told by other bonsai professionals, like it makes the branch more interesting if it gets wire cut in, which sometimes is laziness, but sometimes it's practical. Just depends on how you approach the wound and how you applied the wire and you didn't girdle the crap out of a branch. That kind of goes a long way too. Yeah. And then tip number 5 to kind of wrap it up here is let shoots extend to their full extent before cutting back, unless you are pinching growth to promote back budding and get density. And also let shoots extend to their full extent. What?
Sounded like you said let.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
I don't know if we can say that on this. I mean, I think
to edit that.
No, I think we can either put a bleep right there, or we can just put on because there's a like warning explicit content, and I can just click that for this one episode, and it's like Carmen slipped up one time. Sorry, guys. This one's for 18 and older. No, but no, yeah. No,
sorry, go ahead.
No, let the extensions harden off. I don't know where you even picked that. I know where it was. I just stumbled on the word for a second, but building density, and also this will further heal wounds as well. I know a lot of people will pick over their trees too often and then wonder why they're not getting branch tapering or getting wounds to heal or even angles to set on wire. And you're always wondering, like, this tree, I've been trimming on this tree for 3 years now and it looks exactly the same.
Because you've been trimming on the tree for 3 years.
Nonstop. You wanted to keep it that perfect look to it. It needs to extend. It needs to get fuzzy and hairy. And I like, just kind of makes me think of that saying. It's like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. So you're like, look at this tree and you're like, I don't know what's going on with this thing. It's like, have you been trimming it the same way over and over? Every single like couple of months, you just trim it back to the same shape. You're not letting things extend in certain directions or look for advancement in a branch or a design. Then you're not going to get a tree. And that's another thing that I've noticed in my own practice is like, okay, this tree is nice. And me and you've had this conversation too, Carmen, about this one elm. It's like, I want to chop this elm down because I know that the crown has gotten it's so old now that the crown is untapered and it's just big. It's turning into a knuckle now because there's so many branches up there, and deciduous trees have to be cut down and restart on their crown at least every 10 years or so, depending on how you're building the tree out, especially in high density crowns. And just to move forward with a better design. And you're like, and you told me there's this, what's the thing about if something's precious?
Oh yeah. Sometimes it's the thing that's precious that's holding you back because you like it so much, you're so connected to it, but that's the thing you have to let go of if you're going to progress. So
I mean, you like it now, but like me and Mike got really philosophical in the last episode. It's like you like it now, but bonsai is fleeting and it's impermanent, and it can't stay exactly the same way that it is forever. Like, go look at pictures of Goshen at the National Collection in Washington, D.C. There are older pictures of that tree, and you can see how the crown and the branch placements and even the trunks of the trees, how they have all changed. They didn't change the placement of those trees. Goshen's John Naka's juniper masterpiece at the collection. There's old pictures of that tree where it doesn't even really look like up to standards of what it used to be, and it was in the collection at that time. And our understanding of and what we know about bonsai has advanced so much more, so that tree has been moved along. And the people who curate those trees, and you told me there's been a couple of curators that you've known that have gone through there.
Yeah,
it's up to the curator to move that tree forward. And they're, even with old trees like that, they have to, those things have to be done. They have to be grown out or cut back or developed in certain ways.
Yeah. Especially when you're looking at a Yamadori or something, there's this one branch that you absolutely love, but it doesn't really fit with the tree. Sometimes that's the thing you have to let go if the trees can actually become something.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah, the Yamadori thing is tough because like you collect the tree for like how unique it is, unless it's a very flexible piece of the tree that you can bend and use to your benefit.
And it took like 200 years to grow that branch. So you're like, oh my God, I have to cut this off.
Yeah. And the debate is whether or not was it worth taking the tree off the mountain if you were not going to do the work, Yeah. So yeah, it's tough, but it makes sure, like, going back to letting the buds extend out, because this kind of leads back around to the fertilizer schedule and making sure that trees are not having root problems. This goes full circle back around. I mean, your tree could be having root issues because you've been trimming it constantly and not fertilizing it correctly and not thinning it out and not checking your wire. And it goes full circle, and all these things add up. And I've noticed over a long period of time working with my trees that there are things that I've tweaked in my practice, and I've seen huge results in the past 5 years. I've seen, the trees, I'm like, these are good trees. They're mediocre. And I've seen them elevate, and I'm like, I really like this tree now. Yeah. What did I do different? What did I do this past couple of years? And these are the things that I kind of collected. So, but yeah, I hope it's useful, and it's not just a bunch of, crazy bonsai guy like staring at his trees, ranting. It's kind of what half of it is anyway. So,
I think you're right on. A lot of these are super important things that people just, neglect. I'll fertilize next week. And then 3 weeks later, like, oh, I still haven't fertilized. It's like, you have to put the time in and do these little things in order to, be super successful with your trees. So
all these little things add up to one big thing that is still a little thing that is called a bonsai.
Yes.
That's my Confucius says is quote of the day. Do people even still say that?
I don't know.
You know what?
Probably not, because I haven't heard it.
I think I might even said it wrong. It was like the art of war kind of thing. It's like all these like psalms and kind of like poems about like philosophical ways to live your life. It's like,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody take that and run with that. That was probably one of the dumbest things I've said. So, let's okay.
Put it on a t-shirt.
Probably. Oh yeah, well, I mentioned talking about doing t-shirts, and see, this is something. It's like, oh, I'm doing all these things with my trees, and it's making my trees better. It's like, what should I do for the show? Should I get these t-shirts back online? We need to get that. We need to get that going, Carmen. Yep. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon, not later. But all right. So late episode, commercial kind of like block before we move on to the word of the week, the bonsai word of the week, and then wrap our show up for today. For you guys that have listened this far into the show, thank you so much for listening. Go over to our Facebook page, Little Things for Bonsai People, our Instagram under the same name. Make sure you subscribe. Go over to underhillbonsai.com. Check out my work. Go over to Becoming Bonsai. Check out Carmen's stuff. Carmen, tell us about the Women's Purple Pot Society real quick.
Sure. So I'm also one of the co-founders of the Purple Pot Society, which is an international women's bonsai group put together by women for women in bonsai. You can check us out at thepurplepotsociety.org. We also have an Instagram and a Facebook. So come see what we're doing.
Yep. Excellent. And for Mike, go over to Kitsune Bonsai. That's Kitsune, like the little trickster fox. Kitune. Sune, Kitsune. Well, I said Sune first. Bonsai, BONSAI.com. Mike has online courses available. He's a busy dude. So if you're in the Florida area or even in the Gulf Coast area in the United States, I mean, I know Mike is traveling now and he's booking classes and workshops and all kinds of cool stuff. So check him out over there. But yeah. And if you're just listening, and you gotten this far into your first episode, you're awesome. Thank you for listening. This is what we do. Me, Carmen, and Mike just love bonsai a lot. We talk about it.
They're all right.
Yeah, they're okay. We just do it for a living. It's no big deal.
Only my entire life.
Yeah, literally. Oh, and we'll talk about that later. So yeah, bonsai word of the week. I chose something nice and short and sweet. Saku, or SA. You do?
I don't know that one.
It's just Japanese for to cultivate.
Oh.
Just a very, very short, sweet way to just say I'm caring for this tree, or it's a way to say how you've cultivated a certain species of plant and have taken all considerations into. You factored it in to how to take care of this tree. You're mindful about the weather conditions it requires, the pests that it has problems with, and how to deal with its overall growth habits. And there's another saying that is applied to it in Japanese is Moichi Saku Suru, which means roughly in English also make one. So basically saying to create, to foster and cultivate.
I like that. That's sweet.
Yeah, it's just a little sweet little saying. I mean, I'm probably not saying the pronunciation of that slang or that saying properly because I know Japanese doesn't have the enunciation like we do because we have like a rhythm, whereas that would be a little bit smoother. So. But I'm not going to try to go fast with it because I'll stumble over it.
We do the best we can.
Yeah. But we are mindful of these words so that our listeners will hopefully go and use them amongst their bonsai friends in a sentence. Challenge you guys. I'm going to
saku some bonsai this afternoon.
Saying it like that just it sounds a little okay. Maybe not like that. It's kind of like Saku, or maybe it's because it's very short words, and I know that in Japanese and with the dialect, it's much quicker than that. It's not Saku, it's Saku. It's much quicker, like kind of like Saki. How like in English we're like Saki because we like the rhythm. It's more like Saki or karaoke instead of karaoke.
Yeah, it's almost like lyrical. It's like a short lyrical. Yeah. Yeah.
So take that one to the bank. That's a sweet little bonsai word. It doesn't make us go into like this whole thing about how it applies straight to bonsai, just from the fact that it is just caring for a plant that, and it usually is a word aimed straight at bonsai. This is the Saku development of a bonsai. And yeah. And I mean, I'm always using the word bonsai. That's another thing too, is like with pronunciations, it's very key because there's bonsai. You hear that a lot. I haven't really paid attention to how you say it, Carmen, but I've been taught bonsai.
Bonsai.
Yeah. And so I've even heard like when we use these words properly and actually give them the merit and the appreciation they deserve with these words, the weight that this word carries, somebody will notice it in the way that our twangy southerner talk here, and I go bonsai, and they're like, that sounded weird. It was like a chop into the way you talk. That means I'm giving it reverence because it's important. It's an important word.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we do these words of the week. They're little fun, little facets of our bonsai practice. So, but you got anything else for today, Carmen?
No,
No, well,
I don't.
feeling pretty good about the garden and all the stuff going on in your part of the world in Portland. And
Yeah. Everything's going pretty smooth.
yeah, awesome.
Can't
And
believe it's July. It's craziness.
yeah, and I will be at the national show in September. If anyone's going to Rochester, New York, that's going to be.
I might be at the national show. I don't know.
Yeah, we're still
Maybe,
seeing where that's
probably.
going to fall. Yeah, I will be there.
Crossed.
I will be showing the same tree that I was in Denver with, which is crazy. I didn't think that was going to happen, but it's
How is
happening.
it? Is it reliefing well?
Yeah, it has it gave me a sigh of relief.
Oh, good.
Yeah. You let me get away with that joke, but it's whatever. But no, yeah, it bounced right back. It's a little coarse in leaf size where the leaves were sheared off.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fine. I'm because of how fast it's growing, how hot it is here. I've been regrowing and pruning back, and it's got a little stringy in some sections, but it's just gonna be when I get it to Rochester, I'm gonna let it, like I did with Denver, I'm gonna let it bush out slightly, and then I'm just gonna trim it a little bit and take out the stuff that's taken a beating, because I mean a lot of people are driving for these shows, but
Yeah.
20 hours. We did roughly 18 to Denver, 20 hours to Rochester. It's going to be much cooler. The temperature's going to be a lot easier in September.
Yeah.
So it'd be fine. But yeah, if anyone's going up to the show, that's September 9th and 10th, I believe. It's going to be a Saturday and Sunday. It's in Rochester, New York. It's William Valvanis's Bonsai Expo he's been putting on. This is the 8th one. I think the first one every other year. I think the first one was in 2006. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, it's been going on for a while. It's a good show. Lots of really awesome vendors. Lots of beautiful trees on display. So yeah, when I'll bring it up again in future episodes as we get closer. If anyone has questions and everything, shoot it over to me on my email, Evan Pardue, not Evan Pardue. I don't put my last name on there. Evan at underhillbonsai.com. Or you can become a patron and talk to us over there. So, all right. Well, I think that's good for today, Carmen.
All right.
All right. Well, thanks for hanging out, and we will talk to everybody on the next one.
Bye.